What if I told you that in the future in the United States, one of the most dominant languages would be Spanglish? I'm gonna tell you why. I'm walking around in a beautiful central Texas town, and in this town, there's an incredibly fast-growing Hispanic population. This isn't unique to only Texas. This is happening all around the US and specifically in the Sun Belt region, which is the states of California, Arizona, New Mexico, Texas, Georgia, Florida, and a few others. Why is this happening? Many Hispanics coming from South America, not just Mexico. A lot of people think it's just Mexico. It's a lot more than just Mexico. Colombia, Venezuela, Ecuador, Guatemala, various others are coming to the US for a better life. And we really can't blame them, right? This mass immigration to the US has its effects on language. The Spanish-speaking population of the United States 35 years ago was 11 million. Today, in 2025, that number is over 41 million people. The birth rates of the people that are coming to the US is very high, much higher than the typical American. This has effects on the new generation and the new culture. There will be a lot more Hispanic children being born than Americans if we compare the growth rate. What does that affect when it comes to language? Well, nowadays, it's totally acceptable, and actually, it's considered to be a good thing to teach your children multiple languages, especially if you come from a different country. Many Hispanics are coming to the US, they're having children. Those children are born in the US, they're learning Spanish at home, and then they're going to school and they're speaking English. They have two languages that they're speaking. So when they're at home, they're speaking Spanish. When they're going to school, they're speaking English. When they come together in their daily lives with other friends of the same background, what are they speaking? They're speaking Spanglish. Spanglish is the fastest growing multilingual language in the entire world. It has over 50 million speakers, and it's only increasing every day. And it's a funny thing because I myself am a self-taught Spanish speaker. My wife is from Mexico. And I'm noticing that even myself, I'm starting to combine the two languages, and I'm almost creating a new language, which is Spanglish. One good example is the verb trapear, which is to mop. That's a Spanish verb that means to mop. But what I'm seeing now is that a ton of people will use, instead of saying trapear, they'll say mapear, which is to mop. But that doesn't exist in Spanish. But it's a word that was created. It's a Spanglish word. And so you'll be hearing somebody talk in Spanish and say, vete a mapear. Go mop is what it translates to. But that actually that's not even a real Spanish word. That was a Spanish word that was created. And so I think that trend is only going to explode in the future. We're only going to see more and more and more and more of that. Both languages are starting to be combined, and it's almost turning into a type of Creole like you would see in Louisiana or in Jamaica or in other parts of the world where they're combining what was, in Louisiana, French and English or other variations. But Spanglish is actually becoming the fastest growing multilingual language in the world. And now the United States, for the first time in its history, is becoming a multilingual country where two languages are used by the government. Their two languages are accepted by the government. If you go onto a lot of government websites, both languages are listed, Spanish and English. And it's because now the US has always been a multilingual, multicultural country, but now Spanish is becoming very dominant in the country. And so I think personally in the next 20, 30, 40, 50 years, Spanglish will be a major language that's spoken in the southern region of the US, as well as other parts and other areas of the US, specifically in places like Minnesota or north. You're probably not gonna see this as much, but in those southern regions, especially near the border, you will see Spanglish being spoken much more. Actually, if you look at places like Monterrey in Mexico, Spanglish is a language that you see all the time. Mexicans using English words. So having a whole phrase and throwing in English words. 100% you're going to see Spanish and English spoken very widely, and what's going to come from that is Spanglish. And so I think if you're watching this and you're an American, rather than complain about the fact that, you know, a lot of Spanish speakers are coming, because it's obvious. It's obvious. I mean, you go to the grocery store here in Central Texas, you hear almost more Spanish than you hear English. It's extremely common. And so rather than complain about it, I recommend you learn Spanish. I recommend you learn Spanish because it's just not going to change. This population that's coming, it's not going to stop. It may cease a little bit, but I think it's going to continue for years to come. And the new generation is speaking 2 languages, and they're combining those languages into what we call Spanglish. And so that's my prediction for the next 20, 30, 40 years, is that Spanglish will have a dominant impact in US culture, US linguistics, because it's going to be spoken. It's about 50 million speakers right now. That number is going to increase. The growing population in the US is the Hispanic population. It's growing faster than any other population here on a mass scale. And so that's my prediction. I think Spanglish is going to take over. I think it's going to be growing at a rapid rate. And I find this very interesting as an American, and it makes me even more motivated to learn more and more Spanish and to improve, because Spanish is only going to get more important in the United States, because the clientele, the population, the civilians, the people buying your product or your service, more and more are increasingly Spanish speakers. And so there's more and more of a demand to speak Spanish, and also to be able to understand Spanglish. If you go to Louisiana where they speak Creole, you probably won't really be able to understand it, or maybe a little bit, because you don't understand the other part of the language. And so the same thing's going to happen with Spanglish, is that southern belt, most likely, is going to start creating, I would say in about 30, 40, 50, 60 years, Spanglish is going to be much more spoken by employees, by people in the marketplace. And if you don't speak one of those languages, it's going to be more difficult to understand. I think it's very interesting. It's its own subculture. And I think if you're an American, you should learn Spanish. If you're a Hispanic, you should learn English. Dominate, learn those 2 languages, and be a part of the ever-growing subculture in the US. Thank you so much for watching, guys. Appreciate it, and y'all have an awesome day.